IT Nation Grow. Had the great pleasure of attending IT Nation Grow in December 2024 at ConnectWise headquarters downtown Tampa. Great event. Talk about mergers and acquisition, about growing your MSP. There was buyers there, sellers there. Just a great event and a great community that's being generated from it. I had a great opportunity to talk to 10 individuals while I was there. Really great conversations, really diverse group from very different backgrounds, some MSPs, some bankers, some PE firms, some vendors, really great conversations there. And I enjoyed every single one of them. It got crowded at particular points. Some of the audio might be tricky. It was a great event, IT Nation Grow, December 2024. I look forward to doing many, many more. Thank you, all 10 of you, for your time spending your time with me, having a conversation and listening to my questions. Thanks again.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. I found myself at 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. I took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People ask me, how'd you do it? What's the secret? I need to lose weight. How'd you do it? How did I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others.
What about you? What are some of your personal? What do you like to do personally? Your hobbies? You're a deer hunter.
I'm an avid outdoorsman, so fishing and hunting. So I'm from Iowa, so Arlen and I have that in common. So he's a little bit further west. I'm right in the center there in Cedar Rapids. So avid outdoorsman, sports fanatic. I've got 4 children.
Wow.
So they keep me busy. So yeah.
Tell me about deer season.
Well, it was a little frustrating this
Why?
year. Weather. It was a unique year. It was really dry in the season, and so we actually had what they call EHD. So there's a lot of it's a disease that kills a lot of deer. It's pretty sad actually. So yeah. So it was a good season. We had a lot of fun, but it was seasonally warm in the Midwest, and we had that
Really?
drought there for, I don't know, right during the harvest time. So
Wow.
8 or 10 weeks. So, yeah.
So since it's dry, they die. They can't eat.
Lack of water.
Oh,
Dehydration, and it affects the brain, and then they what they call EHD. So yeah,
and so they just what happens? They just die, and then
it's like a viral disease, and so it actually is pretty sad to watch. They're still alive, but they're really not there, and they kind of roam around, like you can tell. And so then it's
like zombies. Like
yeah, they call it. It's actually called the zombie disease.
Wow.
Don't quote that. I'd have to double check that. So yeah, I just like to. I think in this world, in the fast-paced M&A in the IT space, I use the tree stand as like the zen. You know, you're not talking to people, you're not dealing with clients and customers. You know, so it's a peace of quiet for me.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I used to go with my father when I was young, but I haven't in a while. And the idea is you got to get a license, and you have a certain amount of deer you can get.
Yep. Certain seasons, certain like a weapon, right? So some states have different regulations and seasons of that, and then different times of the year. So it's highly regulated. So.
And it helps because generally speaking, they're overpopulated and they will die in the winter.
Not necessarily. But the insurance companies like it because there's less deer on the road.
For the cars. Yeah.
So and the farmers too, right? But no, it's come from the Midwest. It's one of those things. You typically have some type of outdoor activity, whether that's fishing or hunting, or gardening or whatever it may be.
Right. You spend a lot of time outside as an outdoorsman.
I do.
Yeah.
Children keep you busy too.
And the children as well. Yeah. I've been to the farm in Iowa, but that's like you said. I think that's a little more west.
Yeah, similar. It's pretty flat out there, though.
Yes.
I mean, it's still pretty flat. The eastern side of the state, you got the Mississippi River that flows through it, so you get some bluffs and some cliffs there. So yeah.
Very cool. So we're here at IT Nation in downtown Tampa. IT Nation Grow, of course. And so what are some of your goals here, Corey?
Well, for me is a couple things. Education, right? Continue to learn, stay up to date on what's going on, hearing from a wide array of people in the room, right? You got a lot of good perspectives in there. Networking for me. I've transitioned organizations and roles in here in the last 4 months, and so it's continued to stay networked, and then just continue to expand, that knowledge base, right? And obviously for us, as an M&A advisor in some valuation work that we do, right, is there's some current customers and hopefully some prospective customers for us. So,
And your background is in tech?
so my background is a little bit more in financing. So I spent 14 years at Great America Financial Services.
That's right.
So I actually started in finance, and then I actually oversaw and ran Great America subsidiary company Collaborants.
Oh, yes.
Prior to the sale to Tim at the 20. So I
Collaborants
actually,
went to the 20.
yep.
Interesting.
So I was the general manager of Collaborants for about 4 years there. So I oversaw all the operations at Collaborants, and then I here recently, prior to leaving to go to IT Valuations, I was the general manager of our connected technology group. So that's the financing group for the IT sector, IT MSP community. So I've been in the channel for my entire career.
Wow.
Didn't anticipate that coming out of school, but I've spent so operator finance now with IT Valuations here over the last 4 months. So kind of hit all aspects of the channel.
So your goal here is to talk to MSPs, see if they're interested. Like you're more seller.
Seller or maybe buyer, or honestly, we do a lot of our work in the valuation space.
Oh, you're all valuation.
Yep. So we're doing a lot of valuations for prospective buyers and sellers, and a lot of times we do third-party valuations, right? For you may have a private equity firm buying an MSP, and that MSP really wants a third-party valuation done from somebody that's not privy to the party there. So we do valuation work too. And then Greg's here; he's our CPA. We do have a tax and CPA services that we do as well. So.
IT Valuations is the firm, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, Reed has been around for quite a while.
Yep.
And so, how is an MSP valuated?
I think we everybody in there is going to have a little bit different opinion, but I do obviously think there's a couple key drivers there, right? The biggest one is going to be the financial performance, right? Historical performance, and then obviously future performance, right? Best indicator of future performance is historical performance, obviously. And then there's other factors in there, contract lengths, what does their sales and marketing look like? Principal, right? The owner, what's their background and what's their plans is going to play into that as well. And then you've got some other pieces in there, right? Are they specialized? Are they verticalized? We call it the SVP, right? Specialized, verticalized, productized. Obviously, you're going to get a little bit higher multiple and higher valuation than your generalist MSPs. So there's 8 to 15 probably different areas that a lot of us look at. Obviously, some firms look at it a little bit differently, but for the most part, you get the same drivers of value there. So.
And is so 18, 15 kind of categories or areas, is there a score derived at the end?
We do have a proprietary software that we call Valuations as a Service. So we do run that through that. We've got an integration with QuickBooks and Sage and some other financial packages that we're able to pull that. And so what we do is quarterly valuations. And then we spend time with those principal owners and talk about, hey, if you were able to drive up your gross margin, or hey, maybe if you change from a 12-month to a 24-month contract, here's what we would anticipate your value to be. So Greg and Reed, prior to me joining, the team built a proprietary software that builds in, I think we have 11 key drivers, and some of those are non-financial driven. There's more factors that go into that valuation, but there's, I think, 11 key factors that go into that. So we do put a score to each of those elements, and then we try to put on the ones that you can a nominal value, right? So say, hey, if you can drive this up to this score, here's what we would anticipate. Obviously, that's subject to the right buyer, but yeah, there's definitely scores associated with that.
Seems like some of those, Corey, are subjective.
Some of them are. And some of them are. And we use that more from a discussion standpoint, right? What is the discussion and narrative that when we sit down with a prospective buyer and a prospective seller, that's a good dialogue to have, to say, what we like to say is, like, if you can do that over a journey or over a multi-year period, to say, hey, it is subjective, but hey, when we started this process and journey, I was only at 30% gross margin, but over the course of 3 years, here's the changes we made to our contracts or our service delivery model, and now we're at 40%, right? So you can tell that story, right? Because I do think that shows well, right? From a perspective buying, to say, hey, you had a goal, you set forth, right? budgeting and forecasting is one of those elements, right? What's your financial rigor of your business? Is something that we do factor into that.
So if a business, MSP, even a small business, and they weren't really thinking about selling, why would they still do a valuation?
I think it would help them with their strategic priorities, right? To say, hey, if profitability is going to be one of the key drivers of success of an organization, right? Growth, profitability, among other things. It can give them a scorecard, right? Essentially, it's a relatively inexpensive way to develop a scorecard for you as a business owner to say, hey, here's what I'm going to focus on, or how do I help hold my team accountable for certain things, right? So even if they're not looking to sell, there's still value in that process, and it doesn't necessarily need to be ours, but going through that process can really help them determine where am I at today and where am I trying to get to. So it's just a different way to look at it than just going from a pure P&L or balance sheet analysis, right? Say, hey, what am I looking to do to drive valuation within the business?
So it's just healthy for just corporate, just for corporate health, just to kind of see where you are.
Yeah, I mean, rigor, accountability, goal planning, visionary work, right? I mean, I think it can be, it's an element, it's incorporated in that in any type of, StratOp or EOS or anything of, kind of strategic planning process.
I kind of think about houses when they're evaluated, and then they're say, okay, we're trying to figure out. Then they get other
Comps.
houses.
Yeah,
and
comps.
so is that done here too?
We do that. Yeah, there's definitely a factor when you think about valuations. Valuations not so much on the valuation, but when we think about a purchase price or multiples, there's factors of valuation, and then there's factors of market, right? What's the market bearing, right?
Right. What the market will pay.
Exactly, and that's going to obviously depend on the buyer, what type of synergies, because typically that valuation, it would be like the floor at which you would sell your business for, and there's obviously a premium based on the synergies of those buyers. So it's really a baseline is how we look at that, because you wouldn't want to sell we always say, that valuation would be is like if somebody paid you 100% cash, doesn't factor in what I think our businesses collectively could get out of these collective organizations.
So if somebody's buying another entity and they've never done a valuation, they'd hire you to do a valuation on them. And how much of their cooperation is important in that?
All 100% of it?
It's 100%.
Yeah, because part of it, some of it is not financially driven, right? It's analysis of what we think in terms of their sales and marketing efforts. What's the dependencies of the business owner? We can get that through some data, but part of it's just through like an interview process and a conversation to see, and then doing our own research, right? What are the clients saying about you on Google, or what is Glassdoor saying? Whatever other things you have at your disposal from a public information perspective. Obviously you can get pretty in depth too. We don't do this, but I mean, I know through other deals, right? If I want to interview clients or current or former employees, right? There's all areas that their cooperation needs to be in order to determine, right? Because we're on their side, right? We're doing this to help them, right? But it can feel a little bit intrusive.
Yes,
at times.
almost like an audit.
Yeah, a little bit. It is an audit, right? Because we got to make sure the financials.
Yeah, what's the difference?
And the contracts. What you saying is what you're doing from a business operations is true, right? And we say it could be very painful depending on the level of maturity of your business. But if you're serious about this, it's only going to help you, right? So it takes a little bit of that awkwardness and friction when you do eventually decide if you're going to go through that process.
And so the difference between a valuation and an audit is?
Who's doing it, probably, right?
Like a CPA firm versus...
Yeah, so a lot of times we have a certified valuation analyst. I'm not one myself, but Reed is. And so somebody that has gone through the certification process does the valuation. So you're going to have, obviously, similarities in that process, but the audit's going to be purely, are you following like GAAP, and are you following GAAP, generally accounting principles there, accepted principles, whereas valuation is going to be a lot more broad than that, right? It's not just going to be the financial information. It's going to be operations, service delivery, sales and marketing, client reviews, everything that we look at there.
And why would an MSP want to work with IT valuations?
I think part of it's a little bit the story, right? And the image that we built within this community.
Yeah.
Right? We're very
Been
intentional.
around for a while.
Yeah, we've been around for a while. I think Reed has built a really good brand and image, and obviously that's expanding, right, with the hires of myself and many other great team members here. We're really thoughtful when we're really intentional with what we try to do to the market, and there's times that we know what we do isn't necessarily going to benefit us, but it does benefit that client and the community there, right? So it's a servant leader type of mentality, right? And I think if anybody that's interacted with Reed, you can kind of get that in the first 5 minutes. Part of the reason that drove me to join the organization there. But also too, we're specialized. This is all we do. We don't work with other sectors.
You don't.
We don't. We only work in the IT community, right? So VARs and MSPs and some integrators, right? Or some software players, but this is all we do. So we're specialized, right? And a lot of us have come from this space, myself included, right? So we do know the industry, we do know the players, we do know the market.
And so what's happening in the next year or so with IT valuations? Valuation as a service is really cool. I never heard of that.
It is. That is one thing that we're going to be continuing to bring to market. And we look at that to be able to help that community and continue to educate and build on events like this. Like I said, it's fairly new, but it's actually probably one of the more growing spaces that we have. We have a couple CPAs. And so we do a lot of tax consulting and consulting in that regard because typically speaking, I would say nothing against CPAs, and I love our CPAs.
But
I like to say
however,
typically our MSP owners, if you talk with, they're underserved from their CPAs. It's like a once a year or twice a year. Hey, we got to file. We got to file. We got to do your federal and your state and your personals, and they don't talk. They don't talk about what the strategy and what they're trying to accomplish from a business and from a personal standpoint. So we're obviously growing that. And bringing on more CPAs to be able to help assist with that, to help them through this journey. Not only, even if they don't ever want to do a transaction, that's great, right? But it's really to help them from a strategy, from a tax perspective as well. So that obviously that helps us if they ever do decide that they want to go through a transaction. We've seen their financials. We've met with the owners. We know what their targets are, what they want to do from a wealth perspective, and so we're just better equipped and more accustomed to working with them. So it helps us from a transaction perspective. So that obviously we're doing that to help us, but to really help the channel in that regard, because what we have, and I can't speak to this firsthand, but to Reed can, is we've gone through some transactions where some of the CPAs just really didn't do a great job for the clients, right? And so then we're doing some rework and having to do a little bit more analysis, because the books aren't probably where they need to be in order to have a clean transaction.
Corey, has there been anything in the last month or so that you've changed your mind on?
Work related?
Anything?
Anything? I always thought, kind of coming in, not having done M&A prior to the last couple months, I always thought there was a winner and there's a loser in a transaction. And what I've come to find out is that should never be the case.
Right.
And if it is, that wasn't a good transaction. And typically somebody's upset at the end of it. So that's probably one thing I've changed my mind on is that we're working to work with clients, either buy side or sell side, to find the right fit so it's mutually beneficial. Because if one of those parties comes away, it's like, I got a good deal. That probably wasn't a good deal.
Yeah, the win-win scenario is achievable.
It is. It really is. And I've seen that here in the last couple of months, and I've got a couple prospective clients that I'm working with, and I do think that will be the case as well.
So I started my MSP, Corey, in the 90s, and I was working way too hard. Not paying attention.
Pick your decade. Does it matter?
Doesn't really matter.
Really matter.
Yeah, it was just a while ago.
Yeah.
And I'm at the doctor's office, and I got myself up to 340 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And she's sitting there staring at me saying, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My oldest was just born.
Okay.
Scared the life out of me.
Yeah.
So I'm driving home, punching the steering wheel. Well, how did I do this? So I spent the next 6-7 months, lost about 130 pounds, kept it off. You can't look at it as a finishing line, right? It's lifelong changes.
Yeah.
I tell people the story, and it's like, what's your secret? Like a secret. There's no secret, right, Corey? Discipline. That's how I left it. Yeah, exactly. Willpower, routine, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life?
I mean, I think time management's the biggest thing, right? I think we all are juggling a lot. And I think it comes down to priority, right? What do you put an emphasis on priority, right? So I think time management from a discipline is critical. If you ask any of my team members or former team members, I live in 15-minute increments.
Do you?
So it's like every 15 minutes, I know what the next 15 minutes look like, right? So
wow.
It's really just being disciplined with that and intentional, right? You've got kids, I've got kids. I think we all know that you could go through the workday and get caught up in it and then you're exhausted by the end of the day, and then your kids get the worst of you, right?
Mm.
So it's really trying to be thoughtful around that, and from a discipline perspective,
Right.
right? So whether that's parenting, or coaching, or whatever it is that your hobby is, or your interests are, right? It's just I think discipline plays a big factor in that.
Tell me more about 15-minute increments. I don't understand.
Like, so every 15 minutes, my whole calendar is blocked for the next 2 weeks. So every 15 minutes, I know what I've got to be doing. And then if I have to change something, it forces me to prioritize what is coming up. So this interview was not
Right,
planned.
impromptu.
Which is great. I'm happy to do it. And so I had to make a decision. What am I going to deprioritize,
Right.
move around, and shuffled in order? It's pretty easy at a conference, right?
Right.
For the next how many hours I'm locked in
Blocked,
here.
yeah.
Right. But it forces prioritization. And I think sometimes we're all too victim of the calendar, or like, hey, do you have 15 minutes? I do, but not right now.
Right.
Right. So, hey, and a lot of times I'll ask team members, and this comes from more from a leader perspective, and I don't manage a big team. I used to, is I'm happy to do so, but do you think what you're asking me to do is more important than what Arlen or Greg asked me to do? And then you help me prioritize. So it helps people get an insight to what you're working on from prioritization.
Yeah, the kind of the chunk method, right? Isn't it? Yeah, 15-minute chunk. Very cool, Corey. Well, anybody, I appreciate your time today. Anybody listening and they want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Otherwise, they can email me, just Corey@itvaluations.com. And then I'm part of the Evolve community, so I'll be around to most of those events and try to get to as many other industry events, but I'm pretty responsive typically. So then the only thing I didn't know if Arlen wanted us to talk about anything else that was going on that he was messaging.
I don't know. Was there something else?
Well, Arlen has been, this was back in my prior life at Great America.
Yes.
Arlen
Great company.
Is great company, and now I really appreciate my time there, and wish them the best, obviously, and still helping them. And part of the thing that I'm trying to help them with right now, and they're still working through it, is one of the places that Arlen and my former colleague Lee and I noticed throughout this process is typically there's not a lot of great non-private equity financing options for buyers in the market when they're trying to do transactions on the M&A side, right? So typically they're either going to an SBA loan, or they're going selling private equity. So, but it's that underserved, smaller transactions where they getting the financing. And the funds. And so Arlen and I and some other colleagues there are trying to work through to try to see if Great America's working on it. I can't confirm when they're going to come out with anything formal, but acquisition financing.
Wow.
From somebody that's been in this market for a very long time, knows the players, knows the ins and outs, right? So
That's interesting. So an MSP wants to buy another MSP, they can just get financing there.
They could. They're one option. You know, obviously you could go SBA. SBA's got its perks, but it also has some downfalls.
There's some
to
bureaucracy there,
Yeah, just a lot of paperwork, and obviously some of your collateral and guarantees are going to be different there. Obviously, if you're selling private equity, you don't have to worry about that. You could also go find, some banks will do it, but it's just a different lending approach. They don't know the MSP community, and they don't know acquisitions.
Right.
So I do think that something that we're going to have to figure out within this market and community is where the funds going to be coming from to help facilitate some of these acquisitions. Great America is stepped up, and they did a breakout session at IT Nation. They talked about acquisition financing. It was well received, and I think there was a lot of interest, right? When you think about not wanting to go tie up other debt, or maybe you may have to even get into sub debt or mezzanine to do some of that stuff. So I do know Great America is working on that, and they're looking at individuals like myself and Cogent and other players in the space to help them from evaluation, help them through that process. So it's nice to see different players, even competitors in some regard, right, to come together to try to help figure out a process or other avenues to help some of these MSPs from a funding perspective.
It's incredible.
So I can't speak specifically, but I do know they're working actively on that, and I don't think he'd carry his whisper in my ear. They get that first deal done, and they're working on that.
Wow.
Right now, so.
When I was at the MSP, we used to use Great America all the time to get funding for our,
for
for
equipment,
our projects.
for software.
Yeah.
So they have a unique. I mean, I think if you think about, they already have a relationship with a lot of these
Right.
MSPs.
Why not extend it to acquisition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
and
wonderful.
other banking vehicles or
Right.
other financing vehicles, I do know they have the ability to do. So I think they're one of other players that I think that will come out and try to help in that regard. But it's a spot that we've noticed through in my new spot and as an advisor in the space is one of the first things I'm going to ask is how are you going to facilitate and fund if you're the buyer here? If you're a strategic buyer, non-private equity buyer, what are you using your own equity, cash? Are you using your bank line? what are you going to do here? Because we can't do that at the at the end of the deal, because I've seen that happen where that deals fall through because of funding.
Boy, I'm glad we talked about it. Thanks for bringing that up, Corey. So yeah, keep me updated on that. I'd love to keep people posted on that. That's a really, really great idea.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous idea.
Some unique synergies that we're able to do from a valuation perspective.
Yes.
And then obviously from a financing perspective, there's a lot of great tie-ins to,
Yeah, it's
to really help
perfect
from an
tie-in.
underwriting perspective. So
Corey Kerns, thank you so much for your time
Yeah,
today.
appreciate
Really
it. Thank
appreciate
you.
it. You be well. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.